This is the CHGO Cubs podcast presented by Blue Moon, made brighter. Get Blue Moon delivered and see delivery options by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Brendan, I'll tell you, this podcast would be better if I had a blue moon, but I don't. So
It's
that's
okay.
my mistake.
Next time.
Yeah.
We'll get you a few cases next time.
Yeah, that is my mistake. But welcome in to the Friday edition of the CHGO Cubs podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on Friday, March 8th. Brendan, weeks away from opening day.
I'm conflicted.
Because you don't want the stakes.
I hate the stakes.
Yeah.
I love watching Saturday spring training games, seeing the prospects play in the 6th, 7th, 8th innings. It will be here before we know it.
Yeah, some of it's enjoyable, some of it isn't. Michael Busch hitting a homer on Thursday night.
Look at us.
Cool to see.
Only you and I can make any day.
Yeah. Well, we're doing our best. So on this episode, plenty to talk about. We will touch on the Nick Madrigal injury news, the Caleb Kilian injury news, some 40-man roster thoughts, some general observations on what's going on in spring training. We talked with Brendan the last time I was on about some of the changes that Nico had made or, was working on this spring. We've also seen some from Dansby Swanson. And as you guys know, Brendan here is locked into Dansby footage and his podcast and everything. So I think you're somewhat of an authority on the issue. So curious your thoughts on that.
Dansby should be paying me to advertise his podcast at this point.
Okay. And we'll talk about everything in between. We'll talk about Christopher Morel's defensive issues the other day, the third base situation as it stands, et cetera, et cetera. But Brendan, as we start here, we get toward it. I feel like I always want to start these episodes with how are you feeling about what you're seeing? Anything standing out from spring training in this early going, or are we still just, stay healthy, which isn't working so far, but and get us to that opening night.
Owen Casey, Matt Shaw, the big highlights. Shaw making good defensive plays, contrasting that with Morel's 2 errors in a game 2 days ago. Those stand out. Craig Counsell's quotes. The big trait I keep getting reinforced from Counsell is he's open-minded to the process, not committed to each position and their roles, and still looking to define those roles, which may extend past opening day. But I'm still having fun. I think the Matt Shaw discussion over the past week has been it's been fun because he's a recent guy that was drafted last June, and it does open up conversations about where the Cubs could be come the summer trade deadline at third base if Morel can't progress at Counsell's preferred pace.
Yeah, well, and it's fun to, obviously it's fun when you have good prospects. But I think in particular, what's unique about this spring training time is that you get these guys in major league competition. Now, they're not always facing major leaguers and the usual caveats that everybody's not stretched out. Sometimes it's a minor leaguer you're facing, et cetera, et cetera. But it is cool to see Casey in these games, Matt Shaw in these games, and just to see that potential, not on the big stage, but, like a precursor, if you will, to the big stage. And just seeing them in those lineups and with those uniforms. And I don't blame everybody for letting their mind wander on one Matt Shaw. He was a quick mover for a reason. And when you watch him, it's pretty obvious to see what everybody is excited about. I think especially Brendan, and I promise you we're not going to relitigate this, but I think people are getting particularly carried away on Matt Shaw because of the Cubs' decisions at the third base position. So Matt Chapman signs with the San Francisco Giants. Like the option to address that externally has kind of come and gone, right? And the other day, again, it's early in the process. Everybody talked about it. You're not moving off Morel because he made a couple bad plays. Those are to be expected in this process. But that happens. Madrigal gets hurt, so some of the depth and maybe the considered options now in question. And it's easy for a lot of people to say, "Hey, so how quickly can Matt be at Wrigley
I
Field?
was thinking that too.
Unreasonable? Like, how
Right.
crazy is that?"
With Chapman signing, immediate reactions from you, my immediate reaction, generally speaking, I'll be honest, I was disappointed. And it doesn't discount the potential value of Morel at third base
Yeah,
nor Shaw's prospect status.
yeah,
With 54 million for 3 years with that opt-out structure after the first year, second year, I would have signed up for that within
yeah.
3 seconds back in November.
Yeah. Well, and I think it does highlight, again, you and I, at least I think, have made our feelings on Nick Madrigal pretty clear, as at least as a
Big Nick
starting option.
Magical guys, you and
Yeah,
I.
I think you guys know how we feel about that. But I think regardless of how you felt about Chapman specifically, I think those things happening in such quick succession does highlight, like, listen, for better or worse, the Cubs chose a path for how they're going to attack the third base position. And whether you wanted Madrigal starting, which we did not, or contributing off the bench, etc., that decision immediately takes a hit
Mhm.
after the supposed best option out there signs somewhere else. So again, I don't think it's productive to like relitigate the decision or complain about it or whatever. But I just think, you know, the Morel, a couple defensive issues, Madrigal getting hurt, and the third base option signing elsewhere. It's just one of those things like, hey, the Cubs made their bed here and they're going
Right.
to have to live with how it goes. Now, I do agree with you. I do like Craig Counsell's attitude, as I have said apparently about everything. I feel like I would agree with him no matter what he said. I mean, as long as he said, I don't know, like he hates pickles or something, then I would have to dissent.
That's
But
the line right there, Pickles.
or hot dogs, I don't know, Chicago
Okay.
hot dogs.
Okay.
If he says New York pizza is better than Chicago pizza, stuff like that.
We'll have to have Ryan ask him about that.
Ask the hard questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Um, but I do appreciate his candidness in saying, this is not something that is going to be done and figured out completely by the end of spring training. Some of these mistakes are expected, and we're going to have a fluid attitude on things. And I think, at least when you look back at how the 2023 season ended, at least the spoken attitude is in pretty stark contrast to David Ross's attitude, which famously was, we're riding the
Mhm.
guys that got us here. And despite how guys may have looked or the consideration of what other people could be doing, it was very much this is what we're doing. This is where everybody's playing, and we're either winning or we're losing with that mindset. At least early in the going here, Craig Counsell seems to have a more malleable, let's see. We're going to
Yep.
keep evaluating and we'll see about how we feel about things.
It opens up questions about, for me at least, the front office's role in making these decisions of playing time for prospects and developing young major leaguers. I want to know if going into 2023 spring training, to what degree was Morel's decision to play him in right field most of the time influenced by Suzuki's injury and the front office and David Ross? I'm
Yeah.
genuinely wondering about that.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm wondering, given where the Cubs payroll is right now, about 3 million underneath that first tier of the luxury tax, the first question that comes to my mind is not if the Cubs will go over, because I think they will go over if there's a sense of competitiveness at some point in the season. But my question is, which tier will they go over? Will it be that $257 million tier, or it will be closer to that $277 million tier? The reason I think this is because if there's intention to go over that 257, reach 277, I think missing on Matt Chapman is a mistake. That was
We'll
my
see.
first reaction. Now, if there is a clear cut can't go over 257 by ownership, then I understand skipping on Matt Chapman. But I look at third base, kind of like what you were saying with Nick Madrigal's injury, whether you like him or not, that is lost depth, with Morel's expected developmental pace being very wide and Matt Shaw's timeline to the bigs also very wide and hard to project. It leaves third base very volatile.
Yeah.
And for 54 million, it makes me very uncomfortable. That's what I'll say.
I think the main point being that there was always risk in taking this path. And like, at least in the last week or so, you've seen, even if there's small instances that reflect that risk, you have seen them. Now, at the same time, like, of course, it's a small sample in spring training. Christopher Morel has a 182 WRC plus in spring training. He looks great at the plate. He looked great in those videos. So I'm very excited for what he's going to do at the plate. The defensive stuff, something we're going to have to see about. I watched a good, I think it was a reel or like a YouTube short from the Setup Man podcast.
He's
does
great
work.
Kyle's awesome.
On his show. And he was kind of breaking down the two errors. And the one, kind of was a liner at the glove. He just missed it. I don't know if it was the lights or whatever. And
I don't care about that.
Right. And that was the point he was making. Like, this is just, it happens. It's baseball. It's not a big deal. He's got a good glove in terms of like grabbing stuff. That's not really the issue. The second one, that's where you kind of are like, because it's, and again, this is going to take time. It took Nick Madrigal time. It takes anybody time to learn a new position, however they're going to best do it. Brendan, the footwork, the arm mechanics, the rhythm, at least on that play, messy. Like, it definitely messy. And, he sails the throw over the head, something that is the primary concern. And again, I don't expect it overnight, but it was one of those instances where it was like, okay, the problem is on display. It's on them to get as much progress as they can from now to opening day. And then from opening day to either the point that they are quite comfortable with him there and he is excelling there, or the point where they, have to decide that the defense is not outweighing the offense, and perhaps the DH spot is going to be the better spot.
It's a difficult decision. I'm not painting this as black and white. Oh, Matt Chapman missing on him was bad, because you can point to recent decisions with Trey Mancini and Tucker Barnhart and Drew Smiley, where those at the time cost affordable contracts with expectations of at least playing on the field seemed logical. Ultimately, that prohibited them from going out and making trades at the trade deadline. I can see the front office looking at Morel and at the time Madrigal and Shaw, even Bush, although he's going to need more playing time at first base and third base. I can see at least the idea with the front office not wanting to risk devoting money into Chapman with the possibility of redundancy. I understand that. I will fall back on, though, is if this doesn't work out, if there is a gap at third base, and we go through 2024, get to 2025, like, Jed will be evaluated for that in his contract negotiation extensions for he himself. And Tom Ricketts absolutely will evaluate him on this. So these are the decisions, the fringe decisions that actually do decide front offices. They have to get these ones right.
Yeah. And look, ultimately, like, this path, it puts a lot of pressure on Matt Shaw as well. Not necessarily him personally, but for the organization. And I'm a big believer in him, but if you're not clogging the position to wait for him, he better work. You know what I mean?
One of these guys better deliver.
So I want to hit our first ad break here, but finishing up at least for now, and I want to talk a little bit more about the third base situation, especially in light of Madrigal suffering another, I think, a minor injury, but still another injury to the hamstring.
Yeah, it sucks for him.
Yeah, and it's again, to highlight, I think the throwing error that Morel made the other day is a good highlight of some of the issues that he is working through. But it is not to suggest that it is a failed experiment already. Again, I just want to make sure it's clear, at least from my perspective, and I know the team has said this, the coaches are going to say this, but this is truly how I view it. This is not something that is going to be figured out overnight. It just isn't. I think all of us have played sports. We see how difficult things at this level of professional baseball are. They are not easy to fix. You and I spent a lot of time last season talking about someone like Tyone and trying to fix those mechanics in the middle of the season. It is not an easy thing to do. Changing footwork, changing throwing patterns, things like that, very difficult to do, especially when you're doing it in the context of fielding a 105-mile-an-hour ground ball with Mookie Betts running down the first baseline. So quick decisions, quick twitches, quick reactions. It's going to take some time. So I'm not telling you to ignore the issue. We all know it's an issue. That's been the whole thing leading up to them saying, Craig Counsell saying he was going to play third base, this whole thing. We all know. So my opinion would be, when you see these things, don't get bogged down about it yet. You have to give him time to work through them. And sometimes the only way to fix issues is to see them and to know what they are.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to break it to figure out what works best. That's why going into 2023, I was, as a fan, frustrated they weren't going through that process. Now they are.
You'd like him to have had more time to do this.
I would have liked Morel to break last year or even the year before. That way you can either rule him out at third base or go through that process where you get him fixed and functional.
Yeah.
Let's hit our first ad break here. Come back, talk more about third base. The first ad break here is from Empire Today. With Empire Today, you get shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a low price guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to get new flooring, so of course they have copycats. But Empire cannot be beaten on quality, service, speed, so competitors advertise low quality products that Empire simply will not carry. Empire won't promise the lowest prices because anyone who does is putting flooring in their home they would not put in their own home. They also have a very cool virtual floor designer. It's a great way to see how new floors will look in any space. It's easy. Just snap a picture and instantly see how new floors will look in your own room. Shopping for floors at a big box store can be frustrating. You might talk to someone today who was working in plumbing yesterday, but flooring is all Empire Today does. They live and breathe flooring. So you can be confident you're getting honest, upfront advice. So schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners get $350 off when they use the promo code CHGO. Restrictions do apply. See empiretoday.com/CHGO for details. Second break here from PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Football season is over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for playoff home court, there's no shortage of high stakes basketball moments this time of year. So get in on the excitement of PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. Conference tournaments coming up. Biggest tournaments, biggest moments in college basketball are now here. Also be part of the action on PrizePicks for both men's and women's college basketball. Go to prizepicks.com/CHGO and use code CHGO for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/CHGO and use code CHGO. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. I saw Illinois lose a basketball game. Only reason I know is because Cody seemed very upset on Twitter. So, I wouldn't bet on Illinois basketball players using PrizePicks. I may bet on like Kevin Durant on the Suns, who was going off the last couple of days. So that would be my PrizePicks bet, Corey. Is Kevin Durant for like 30 points and, I don't know, Trae Young for 15 points. There you go. That's my basketball knowledge for you.
Okay, I have no idea why you have opened yourself up to
I did.
the response that Cody is going to
I
give you
actually
for
didn't
that.
mean it. I didn't mean it like that, though.
Good
I
luck with
regret it
that.
instantly. Cody, I did
But
not mean it.
as we come back from our first ad break here, if you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the CHGO Sports YouTube page. Hit that like button for us, for the whole CHGO crew, but for Brendan and me
Yeah,
specifically, if you want.
specifically us two.
If you
Yeah,
want. We're
for
wearing
sure.
matching sweaters. We
I
didn't
know it's
plan
got
on
it. It's
that,
got it. Yeah,
so
we wore matching black shirts last week. We're just in
we're
sync,
just
Cody.
in
Look at
sync.
us. Look at
Yeah,
us.
great. It's just what I wanted.
Sorry.
So finishing up on the third base thing, yeah, I do the Madrigal thing is a bummer. Again, I feel like we've
Is
tried
it?
to
Is it a
very
bummer?
carefully. I never wish injury on people, Brendan.
I know.
And
I know.
I think we very carefully tried to cash our criticism in that the main crux of the criticism was the idea of him getting starting level reps or really anything close to that. I
And
think,
batting leadoff.
right. I think the contact, the potential value, the work he did at third base so that he's able to play multiple positions, it has value on a team. Now, the issue becomes seems to be a mild strain, but it is a strain nonetheless. And unfortunately, I revert back to things that I had said during Chris Bryant's tenure with the Cubs, which is I really don't like discussing guys as being quote unquote injury prone. I think it to me it has somewhat of a bad connotation toward the player personally. It's not their fault they get injured. They're doing their job, they're trying, and some people's bodies respond differently. And unfortunately, though, there are people, however you'd like to phrase it, I just like to make sure it's not directed at the individual or their effort or anything like that.
You're still just protecting Chris Bryant. After all these
Always.
years, it's your
Guys,
instinct.
guys get hurt. That's the
Yeah.
point. And unfortunately for some, they get hurt frequently enough that it becomes difficult to plan for them and around them. And obviously, the Cubs are planning to give Christopher Morel every opportunity to be their starting third baseman. Patrick Wisdom is still on this team. You have other options. When Matt Shaw is coming up, you have someone like Garrett Cooper, who would have to be added to the 40-man roster, but is, potentially an option there, et cetera, right? And it's all just to say, you have someone like Miles Mastrobuoni, who we've seen play several positions.
Although he's been in left field with Ian Happ and out.
Right. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to consider as the Cubs are going to make these roster decisions. And I think obviously at this point you're not going to be in a situation where you're rushing Nick Madrigal back to break camp with the team. But I do think that this has got to be something that they consider going forward. You have to consider that it's the oldest cliche in the book, right? The best ability is availability.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you can't rely on that, you have to act appropriately. So I'm not saying that they need to cut him or give the bench jobs to somebody else, but as you're doing your calculus, you have to consider what are redundant skills on this team. How many contact hitters do they have? How many guys that can play this position, this position, this position? How many that can play multiple positions? And how can we count on guys
Mm-hmm.
to be available for us? And so there are a lot of decisions that the Cubs are going to have to make. Our Discord, which I have some thoughts, I asked, what they wanted us to talk about in the CHGO Cubs Discord, exclusive for diehards. Visit
Hey.
allchgo.com. Stuff that they wanted us to talk about. And that was one of them. What are they going to do with Wisdom? Are they going to give an opportunity to someone like Garrett Cooper who mashes left-handed pitching? And are certain things redundant? And these are questions the Cubs are going to have to answer. And the Madrigal, even light injury, while it may make the breaking camp roster a little easier, it does complicate the fuller picture.
It does. I don't like calling certain players injury prone either. I look back at Chris Bryant's tenure with a flurry of a variety of injuries to knees and ankles and head and everything. I do think it's different than Madrigal. The main reason is Madrigal has expressed over the years frustration with his hamstring. He talked about his hamstring on the CHGO show with Luke and Ryan during CubsCon. At the time during CubsCon, he expressed optimism that those hamstring problems were behind him, which means there was a point in time where he was discouraged about the high frequent hamstring injuries. That hamstring injury has come back. So I need to think about Madrigal not just at his current value when he is on the field, but also this is a recurring problem. It is. His hamstring problem is reoccurring. Now, how do the Cubs forecast that with 40-man crunches? How do they forecast the third base spot with Morel's development, Bush maybe having to play third base, even though he was used mostly during practices at first base? What does that mean for Miles Mastrobuoni, who's been getting left field reps? What does that mean for even Canario? Does Canario's role now get elevated as a result of Mastrobuoni being relied upon to play the infield position? There's a lot of different directions where I think this will go. Back to our earlier council points, is the obvious answer isn't made known to us right now. I think over the next week, 2 weeks, it will become clear. I think the decision will be obvious, at least to council's perspective, which I appreciate. At the current onset, the way I look at it now, for me, given everything we know, I would probably rely on putting Mastrobuoni back in an infield position and giving more reps to Canario in the outfield. So if we need a backup third baseman or the third base innings, my pecking order of priority would be 1, Morel, 2, just from a pure defensive standpoint, probably would be Mastrobuoni. Then I would rely on Bush as that third guy over Patrick Wisdom. I would put Patrick Wisdom more in that first base role. Although if he has to play third base, I'm fine with it. He hasn't looked good in the past 2 years, but he has a great arm. He has the experience there where I don't feel as if he's going to make terrible, egregious plays at third base. I don't think the situation's as dire in terms of performing below replacement level, but the expectation of replacement level obviously is not good enough.
Yeah. So we'll see what they do. Again, as you said, like some of that is going to depend on Ian Happ's status and how they're feeling about that, or if they need to utilize the DH maybe early in the season to make sure that he's healthy, feeling good. It's tough to say.
What if you just call up Matt Shaw on opening day? There you go, kid. Go get him. They're part of the infield with Dansby and Nico for the next
I feel like
7 years.
Other teams have done crazier stuff, but
listen, it's happened, man. You know, they were aggressive with Kyle Schwarber out of college. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
The way I would run through a wall.
Put Caleb Kilian. I already saw me in the front office. I got the solution. Yeah. Caleb Kilian, 60-day IL, right? There's 40-minute implications. And then you just bring up Matt Shaw. And then there you go. Yeah. And by the way, just sign up for a 10-year contract while you're at it.
Sure. And how do you feel? What's your gut feeling on, any potential involvement from someone like Garrett Cooper?
That was always such a puzzling move when they signed him. I like Garrett Cooper a lot because
just somebody that smashes lefties.
Yeah, he's had that precedence. He smashes lefties. I think the key word of today's podcast is redundancy. I thought he was redundant with Patrick Wisdom. I thought he was redundant even just from a first base volume potential role with Bush and Wisdom, and they had previously signed Dom Smith, and you have Matt Mervis. It was very odd to me. If 40-man problems aren't that dire, then yeah, I would love to have Garrett Cooper on this team. But if there's decisions to be made where the 40-man is looked upon with some fragility, then I may be less willing to give Garrett Cooper that role. We'll see. Sure, you want to bring up Garrett Cooper, put him on the 40-man, and give Matt Bush reps at third base when Morel's not playing there every day. I'm fine with that. It goes back to my earlier point, though. It's like, damn, Matt Chapman is right there. All you got to do is guarantee $50 million. Yeah. So
yeah, and so just to be clear, like I think I in the earlier conversation was putting Cooper more in that third base conversation. What I meant was that him and Wisdom may sort of occupy the same space. Like Garrett Cooper, I think, has predominantly more of a first baseman at this point in his career. He spent some time in several places, but in terms of power guy, mashes lefties, and maybe not a lot else is
You
sort of,
have to wonder, with someone like Cooper's recent track record, if the Cubs told him, hey, you're not on the 40 man yet, but here's the way you get to that 40 man. I imagine he had other opportunities with other teams that weren't as competitive as the Cubs. So the fact that he chose the Cubs on this contract is very interesting to me. I don't understand why he would pick the Cubs if he had other choices. So he's going to be on the 40 man and he'll be on the opening day roster is probably what I'm thinking.
So, we'll hit our second ad break in a few minutes here, but the other injury news was, as you mentioned, Caleb Kilian should be out for a bit, and someone who is likely going to hit the 60-man injured list, and this is a shoulder injury, which is never a great thing for a pitcher. No. And, a bummer. I think he had shown some good stuff in the limited action in spring. Craig Counsell spoke very highly of him. And obviously a guy that I think a decent number of people have maybe not given up on, but gotten a little tired of hoping on or dreaming on after some of the experience at the big league level. But as we said with Madrigal, you never like to see guys get hurt, especially when they are trying to work through things or earn their opportunities and kind of reclaim parts of their career. So that's a bummer. And you feel for Caleb. He's obviously put in a lot of work to try to get to the big league level, work through adjustments of problems that we saw at the big league level. So as you continue to progress, it's a bummer when that gets derailed by an injury, and one that is not as significant as it could have been, but it will sideline him for a bit and is sometimes a difficult thing to work back from. The implications for the roster are that given the length of the injury, the Cubs will ultimately at some point, they have not done yet. Again, if that has changed by the time this podcast airs, please, seek that information.
We're not live, by the way.
Right. They have not put him on the 60-day IL yet, but if they do, it would open up a 40-man roster spot. So as we discussed, the Cubs have some options for how they would choose to use that. There are a decent number of interesting players that I think a lot of people have wondered what their role might be or if they would get a role, things like that. But in order for that to happen, they would have to be added to the 40-man. So there's other ways, and probably by the end of spring training, we may see the Cubs open up some more of those spots, either via trades or releases or anything they may decide to do. But this is one that will get opened. That is something that we can sort of expect to see, and that will present an opportunity for the front office and, of course, all of these players to fill that void immediately.
You know what I wish I could open right now? Blue Moon Corey. This show, presented by Blue Moon, made brighter, get Blue Moon delivered, and see delivery options by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Quick story about, 5-6 years ago, with my grandmother, and my grandmother, unprompted, asked me, hey, do you have any more of those Blue Moons? My grandmother's favorite beer.
Really?
Blue Moon. Yeah. And she has great taste. Great taste. So
is she rocking the orange slice? I asked you that, but is your grandma rocking the orange slice?
At the time, no orange slices at my place. But
no time. Give me the beer.
She enjoyed the citrus taste. So if there's any a persuading factor, is that my grandmother's favorite beer, Blue Moon.
There you go. I mean, that's quite a ringing endorsement.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. So I'm very much looking forward to Summertime Shy, some Blue Moons in the studio with Cody, the beer bat, Stucky.
Will you do a beer bat this summer?
My thing, I'm very much more inclined to do it if Blue Moon is what's in the beer bat. I will say last year, what was the terms? I think they had to win. The doubleheader was in Colorado toward the end of the year. I don't remember. They played a doubleheader And I said, if they win both games, I'll
do the
do the beer
bet.
bet. They did not. So there you
Okay.
go. They have to
Okay.
earn it from me. It's
Okay.
Cody's bit. I don't want to steal his bit. And yeah, if they want me to do that and embarrass myself on a live show, yeah, because I will tell you, I tested it. It comes through very quick. You did it, didn't you?
I'm telling you, it's very.
It's yeah.
The problem is those
You don't realize
bats.
that.
Yeah, the bats are like 3 feet. And
Yeah,
so, listen, I got a lot of drinking experience underneath my belt. I did
sure.
not expect the beer to be flowing that fast. I
Yeah.
was shocked when I did it. And I still survived. So,
Yeah. So that's that. The main point being, enjoy a blue moon. Do so responsibly.
you're talking about these certain circumstances of you having to do things. That reminded me, I'm still devastated about it. The John Lester bunting tattoo, all he had to do
Yeah.
was hit one more home run in the 2018 season, 2017 season, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And our own Corey Friedman of CHGO would have gotten a John Lester bunting tattoo. Where? We never decided,
That's
but
true.
I was suggesting your neck, but we'll
The
never have that.
the context of that quickly is that the Cubs tweeted something about they tweeted a picture of John Lester bunting, not against the Mariners. I believe it's in Milwaukee. I think he's wearing the gray uniform. Of
Can
course,
still remember this.
he's hitting, so he has his socks up. One of my
Of
favorite
course.
things about John Lester is that he pulled his socks up to hit. Absolute gamer, just a baseball guy. That's such a baseball
Through
move,
and through, man. Love the
Pitching,
guy.
no.
No,
Hitting,
hitting,
hold on, I have to pull
socks
my
up.
socks up. It's like he's
Yep.
a different person.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I was like, this is such a beautiful tweeting innocuously, not thinking of how my actions would have consequences. And I just said, this is such a cool photo. Like, I don't have any tattoos, but maybe I should get this. Completely joking, whatever. And the wonderful folks who run the @Cubs Twitter account responded. This was very shortly after a friend of the podcast, Michael Cerami, had jumped into the lake because Ian Happ homered on the first pitch of the 2017 season. 2018,
Man,
2017,
I think 2018.
the Marlins.
Yeah, I think that was
Sorry.
2018.
I'm
I know.
a little older now. My brain is a little
We're
foggy.
getting really old.
Yeah.
Really old.
They all blend together. I don't
Ay, 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 ay,
know.
ay.
On the only season that doesn't really blend together is 2016, where the Cubs
Why is
won the World
that?
Series.
Won the World
Bang,
Series. Got
got
it.
it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they said, you have a really great opportunity to one up Michael. And instead of jumping in the lake, what do they have to do for you to get a John Lester bunting tattoo? And I said, either win the World Series again, or he hits 2 homers this season. And the first one was quickly after that, which was bad. And I remember he got close a couple times as that year went on. And there were a couple times where he hit a fly ball to the track or to the outfield where I could feel my heart in my stomach because enough people saw that tweet. And knowing the @Cubs social team, I would have been held to the fire in so much as somebody can not force me to do it, but
I would have forced you to do it.
the
I
pressure would have been.
literally would have put you next to fire for you to get that tattoo.
I think I would have maybe made a desperate plea to John himself to say, hey, do you mind telling people that this is a bad idea and not to do this?
Because John replies to you all the time. So he
I
would,
have,
of course.
yeah, we're friends
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
Twitter.
I can tell. Go to your Twitter. It's there.
Yeah. Before we did jump back into the conversation, but before we continue the conversation and kind of hit our last big segment here, did want to take a second to again remind you of everything going on at CHGO. Remind you to visit allchgo.com and read about becoming a diehard member. The diehard membership, as I said, we already have some questions and comments from our loyal Discord members. You get access to that when you sign up to become a diehard. You guys know we have podcast live shows, every team, every day, post-game shows, written content from our guy, Ryan Herrera, and our guy, Jared Willis, over at allchgo.com. 20% off all of the events we do. March 26th, there is a Blackhawks takeover at the United Center. We will have more Blackhawks takeovers, Cubs and White Sox in the summer during baseball season. You get a free shirt when you become a member. CHGO just launched their new Chicago collection. Luke was modeling. They did a CHGO shirt that looks like a Chicago pizza box. Brilliant. An absolutely incredible design. I have already ordered the shirt. I can't wait to wear it. You'll see it on the show as soon as I have it. So do check all of that out. We appreciate your support. There's a lot going on at CHGO, and we would love to have you be a bigger part of it. It helps support us, the people working on these shows and articles behind the scenes. So we appreciate all your support very much. You guys allow us to do what we do, and we wouldn't be here without you. So visit allchgo.com to learn more, and we appreciate that. So back into the discussion. I was looking, one of the things I wanted to talk about, I did want to talk to you about the Dansby swing mechanics that you have noticed and kind of seen some of the stuff that he has been working on. Now, we talked about Nico last time and how you felt about some of those changes, maybe trying to elevate a little bit occasionally, add a little bit more pop to the game. With Dansby, talk to me about what he's doing, what he's working on, and what the end goal is. And maybe we've had a lot of discussions about how the Cubs didn't really juice up the lineup. Now, obviously, if Michael Busch hits homers like he did on Thursday night in the Cubs spring training game, if Christopher Morel is going to put up a 180 WRC plus like he has in the 20 plate appearances in spring training so far, then it is a little less important. But without adding more superstars to the middle of that lineup, depending on how Craig Counsell shakes things out, we talked about how last year Dansby was kind of relied upon to be a 5-hitter, kind of more middle of the order guy than he really should have been given his track record as a hitter. So are these changes possible to push us further to that or get us more comfortable than that? What's he working on? What do you think about it?
He's working on specifically combating changeups and breaking pitches. How he's doing this is centered from me watching his YouTube videos and watching some of the backfield videos by our friends over in the backfields in Mesa. It appears as if he's trying to, as he says, stay on line. I may know the terminology is wrong, but I'm just going off what they're saying. And what I've seen Dansby do over and over and over again is focus on not having this weight transfer from his, it's called back hip to front hip, so fast. He was working with his coach during the offseason, and his coach was giving the example about how this certain college would be tearing up the front of their hitting maps because their front foot would be literally ripping the mat, and that times up fastballs for your optimal power. And Dansby kind of was doing that. If you watch Dansby over the past few years during his power surges, great fastball hitter. He himself has said it. We've seen it in the numbers, and he was able to hit 25 plus home runs predominantly on fastballs. Now, if you look at him now, what you're going to notice is if you draw a box in between the front of the batter's box and the back of the batter's box, if you were to track his hip movement across the box, his current hip movement would not travel as far in distance. It would be more locked into the ground is the best way I would describe this. The reason, again, he's doing this is specifically against those off-speed and breaking pitches, especially on the lower third outside portion of the plate. The benefit about Dansby as a person is that he's aware of these problems that he needs to improve, and he even said that in the offseason. But also, we saw it towards the back end of 2023. I'm going to show a graph here. If you look at this graph, we have
surprise
today,
graph.
Corey.
I didn't know we had
look
one.
At that. We have a graph.
Bing, bing, bing.
If you look at this graph, you're seeing Dansby Swanson's whiff rate visualized. On the left, whiff rate August of 2023. On the right is his whiff rate in September. Now, if you joggle your mind, you'll notice that you remember that in August, he had his worst month offensively. In September, started off better, especially in that Colorado series, but tailed off towards the end of that September run to many people's criticism. Now, the difference between March through August and September is that in September, he showcased the lowest whiff rate of the season, especially against pitches on the lower right third of the zone. And he was getting eaten up on these pitches, especially in August. Ultimately, by the end of the season in September, he was against pitches on the lower right toward the zone around 10 to 15% rate. In comparison to previous months, he was whiffing in the same zone at around a 40 to 60% rate. That is such a notable difference that I can't stop that. The way he ended September went into the offseason, and that was his number one goal. I need to fix my ability to hit pitches in that zone. And I think we're seeing the intention right now in how that will improve his offense is to be determined. I think one consequence is that you might see some power go down. We'll see if that ultimately hurts his overall production. But me personally, I've always expressed concerns, if you want to call it that, about how his current profile ages, given his power to contact profile. And if this is one way he can improve his contact, I'm for it. In fact, I'm pushing for it. I would like to see more contact and more of these changes implemented.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that you got to what the potential drawback might be, because that was going to be my next question. Because of course, in these games, in sports, really in anything in life, you make an adjustment one way, you may be making an adjustment in another way, or sacrificing something, or there may be
It's a
something else that
delicate
opens up.
balance.
So
There's
it
pushes
is.
and there's pulls.
Yeah, I do appreciate, again, I said this about Counsell and Dansby specifically, I think last week, like, you just appreciate that these are two of the guys that are leading the Cubs in the future, because
Yeah.
Dansby is very open about his desires to win, his contributions to that effort, what he wants from the organization, and what he wants for himself. And I think that that's what you want in a leader. Is he a perfect baseball player? No, but he is open about what he can get better at, or areas that he did not live up to the expectations that fans may hold for him, or the expectations that he holds for himself. And, some people may say, great, he gets paid $28 million.
I'll
He's
take that.
honest, awesome. But listen, there's plenty of players who are not open about these things and who don't put in the effort to fix these things. They are who they are, and that's what you're getting. So I at least appreciate that if he is going to be so outspoken and be the guy who wants to be the leader and the de facto captain of this team now, if you will, that he puts himself out there as well and is open to the criticism of himself and how he can continue to get better, which, as he says all the time, he also expects of everybody else in the entire organization. So I appreciate that, at least. As we're winding into our last, 10 minutes or whatever it may be,
2
we did
hours.
we did get a question in the CHGO Cubs Discord from Austin. I don't know if we'll get to everything that came up in the Discord. I think we touched on some of it. But he asked, last year was, as our good friend Cody Del Mendo coined the phrase, the summer of Mike Tauchman. And his thought, which I thought was a more lighthearted way to, round out the show, who do we see as sort of creating similar vibes in the 2024 season? Maybe someone unexpected that fans rally around, or that creates a buzz like Mike Tauchman was able to.
Man, I don't think we'll able to replicate the summer of Mike
Perhaps.
Tauchman.
Yeah.
That's a big ask. Whew.
I'd have to go back and look too. I wonder. I mean, Cody, when he has a good one, he will continue to use it. So I think that's certainly part of it. But I'd be curious to go back and look at, like, what the true onus of that, like, catching on was.
Yeah.
Again, Cody started it. I know the Cubs used the phrase at some point, but I'm curious, like, if there was like an inflection point of, like, oh, everybody is on board with this at this
Not
point.
to throw Cody under the bus here on his bits, I will
We've
say
already insulted Illinois
I
basketball, so
guess
tread
I'm
very
I guess
carefully.
I'm killing Cody Del Mendo on his podcast today. I love the guy. I will say behind the scenes in our Slack channel, when the whole summer of Mike Talkman thing was going on, we had hold on, let me get to it before you start making faces at me. When when Jared Young was called up, there was some summer of Jared Young things going on in that Slack channel too. So
I think those were a joke.
if no, this is before Talkman went off. So Jared Young, it probably
Well,
to break everyone's hearts and everything, but
yeah,
just saying.
I'm not touching it. I know
I would
better than to,
I can
poke
tell.
poke
I
the
can
bear,
tell. I can
so
tell.
I'm
So
gonna
I think
counter
the
that.
onus
I'm gonna counter that by saying I love all of Cody's bits. I went to Michigan. I don't really care about Illinois basketball,
what
and
does that have to do with anything?
leave me alone. So,
What
anyway,
does
yeah,
what does
I
going to
mean,
Michigan have to do with anything?
well, I'm not gonna say something nice about Illinois basketball, but I'm also not going to,
Oh, I
uh,
see. I see.
talk them down as you did.
I have nothing
Um,
against Illinois basketball.
anyway, I think, yeah, it's a tough question because I think Talkman was a very unique situation. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it could be Talkman again. He's gonna get some significant opportunities here, and if he performs the same way he did, I can sort of just see those vibes continuing. Given that he was never really expected to do that by anyone or the fan base or anything. Um, so I think, if you're looking for guys that are, less heralded, I think Michael Bush represents a very easy opportunity.
Yeah, but he's a top 50 prospect, you know.
Sure, but I just mean in the sense that,
I got a good one. Keep going,
he
but I got a
yeah,
great one.
he's not going to be as familiar to, maybe more casual fans, or maybe their
Yeah.
expectations of him are gonna be pretty measured, and if he turns into a guy, I think people will quickly get on board, with that. Outside of that, I mean, I think it's sort of obvious, but I mean, I think Shota certainly has an opportunity to do that, but that doesn't really fit
No, you
the
gotta fit the whole
Talkman vibe.
30-year-old journeyman, came over from, foreign baseball leagues, resurrected his career. It's a difficult one.
I
It's a
mean,
story unlike any other.
yeah, I don't know.
The
Maybe there's
Palatine connection,
a insane scenario where Carl Edwards Jr. replaces Killian on the 40
that's
man.
actually
He ends
not
up
a
the
bad one.
closer, and everybody, and
That
it's the craziest
you know,
bookend. How
that's
about
it.
this? How about let me
That's it.
lay this out for you?
Let's hear it.
Carl Edwards Jr. added to the 40 man, and in the most bringing everything, to a circular end. Not only does he pitch in the game the Cubs win the World Series again,
Oh,
but he
okay.
finishes it this time. Finishes the story.
I'm gonna start tearing up over here. That's a great visualization. That's who it is.
Well,
That's literally
that's
the
what you were
player.
gonna say?
No, 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 no,
Oh.
no. I was
Well
thinking
well, so
Brennan
but
Davis.
I do just wanna, I love I think the epitome of you and I, and maybe a lot of Cubs fans, is that I can paint that picture 20 minutes after, their win projection is still only 81. It's not good enough, so we contain multitudes.
Of course, that's a great one though. I hope that happens. Getting greedy with the World Series, but just him having a role in this team would be awesome. I was
Yeah.
gonna say Brennan Davis. The parallels that he's resurrecting his career. Maybe he's healthy enough to play in the outfield for some reason. Happ may be injured longer than we expect. God forbid something else happens to Seiya or anyone else in the outfield. Maybe Brennan Davis. That would be a good story too, with all the struggles injury wise and the
Yeah.
motions and prospect rankings now in like the 30s of some of those lists. Having Brennan Davis up, healthy,
The
productive.
concussion protocol, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that would be fun. So that's
Yeah,
my pick
that
is
that
Brennan
that
Davis.
that's a good answer. That would be a lot of fun. He's
Thank
an
you.
incredibly easy guy to root for. You and I had the very fortunate opportunity to interview him years ago. Very nice to us when he didn't really have
And
any
what year
reason
was
to
that?
be.
2019?
I just said the years all blend together. I don't know.
Man, had to be
Um,
2019.
and that would be a really great story. Yeah. So I think that would be a very easy one. And it would almost be like everyone would sort of get to live out, how it should have been if he had just sort of ascended as the prospect status was climbing, the shirts and the sayings and all of that. There is an alternative universe where it existed, but it still can.
I got a good one.
Okay.
You ready for this one?
No.
Now, there might be some, problems injury-wise for this to happen, which might suck. Joey Votto on the Cubs. That would be,
yeah.
that would
I
be, that would
saw
be fun.
him pleading.
That would be fun.
Yeah. I think it's one of those where, we're already trying to figure out how they're doing this roster. I'm not sure.
I'm just saying.
No,
maybe some injuries.
I mean, he's an incredible vibes guy. So
he seems like the perfect Wrigley guy,
Yeah.
I could see Joey Votto singing the stretch as a player up in the booth. Go up to the booth, sing the stretch, come back down, maybe chug a beer up in the booth before he comes back down to play the seventh inning.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's an ultimate vibes guy. And I think, he's one of those that it seems like even though he's always, done damage to the Cubs, like people have a hard time. He doesn't enter that category of like, most of the guys that we all hate collectively.
Well, the good thing about Joey Votto is that his peak value corresponds with the Cubs sucking. So like during like 2011, 2012, 2013, I didn't care.
He wasn't really a villain at the wrong time.
Yeah. And then, Cubs got good, won the World Series, by the way, and the Reds sucked. So it's like, it ebbed and flowed perfectly for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So
that's what we have.
I think those are pretty good answers. I think that's what we have for everybody. As usual, spring training rolls on, and there are still, again, I tend to be of the belief that the Cubs are done with their moves, but we live in a world where some of these free agents are still unsigned, and you're watching them sign for pretty not experimental but short option laden, Jed Hoyer style contracts. So I'm not expecting Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery to burst through those doors, but if the terms reach a certain point, I think most teams can be considering taking those flyers. So I'm not expecting it. I get the sense that they're done, but you never know. The baseball world, the free agent world is a different place than it once was. So I'm not really sure. We'll call it a non-zero chance. I don't know how much higher I would put it than that, but you never know.
If they sign Blake Snell at 2 a.m, are you coming on the show?
Yes, I will be there.
There you go.
Blue
you
moon
and I.
in hand.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. You have a promise. Blake Snell, 2 a.m, blue moon in hand.
I would do Jordan Montgomery too. Let me be fair.
All right, we'll do both of them.
I think either would very much improve the Cubs' starting pitching situation.
That's our promise to everyone else. Those two guys.
Yeah, and look, you never know how they're feeling about those luxury tax thresholds. Of course, that's always kind of the guiding light for some of these decisions. But you never know. Spring training rolls on. If these guys are sitting there and Jed is watching it, and you never know what might strike him as, hey, our pitching depth, I don't like it as much as I thought I did. Like, hey, let me give Scott a call and see what they're willing to take. How low can we go? Never know. So
never know.
As always, we'll keep an eye on it. We'll jump on some form or fashion. The CHGO Cubs podcast will assemble to do that. On our way out, as always, appreciate the support. If you wouldn't mind hitting that like button on your way out, check out allchgo.com. Check out all the written work, sign up to become a diehard, etc. And yeah, I think that's about it. What are we here, Brendan? 3 weeks from opening day? 1, 2, 3, 4. A little under 4.
3, 4. Yeah. Make sure you count that on your hands.
I was using a pen to write something, so I couldn't. That's why I couldn't do the math. But rapidly approaching. So, this last week, since you and I last talked, was not great. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't great in terms of the everybody get their work in and stay healthy kind of vibes. So hopefully that kind of picks up, or, we avoid more of those going forward here. But that is one of the main things to watch. We will be right there with you watching close up frames as we can get of Christopher Morel's footwork and his throwing angle and motion and things like that. And freaking out about small samples and spring training stats and all of that fun stuff. So Brennan and I will be back with you next week. As always, don't forget to tune in to the boys, Luke, Cody, and Ryan, Monday through Thursday. We appreciate you tuning into the CHGO podcast and all of your support for the CHGO Cubs podcast. It's a little redundant, but we appreciate your support. Brennan and I will talk to you next week. And as always, go Cubs.